I was home alone when a creepy stranger entered my house. What happened next is unbelievable. I never should have opened that door. I should have listened to the nagging voice in my head, the one whispering warnings. But there I was, feeling brave, or maybe foolish, in my quiet house. The shadows danced and flickered. Outside, the wind howled like a creature, and the sky darkened, turning the world into a twisted nightmare. It was a dull afternoon. The kind where time drips slowly, like the old faucet in my kitchen. I was sprawled on the couch, listening to the dull thrum of the fridge, feeling the cold creeping in. My phone buzzed, a notification, something mundane. I rolled my eyes and put it down. Then I heard it. A faint noise. At first, just a rustle. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was the wind, or maybe the trees scraping against the house like long fingers. But then came a creak. Not the usual sounds of an old house settling. This creak was deliberate, like someone testing the floorboards. My heart raced, pounding in my chest like a warning bell. I sat up. Darkness cloaked my living room, pressing in. Shadows gathered, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. I moved closer to the door, a chill racing down my spine. Cold sweat dripped from my brow. I leaned in, heart hammering, pushing the door open a crack. Nothing. Just the heavy silence, but my instincts screamed at me. I stepped back, sinking into the couch, my fingers digging into the upholstery. Then it happened again, a thud, louder this time. The sound echoed, resonating through my bones. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat heavy. My eyes darted around the room, catching reflections in the dark, and then I saw it. A shadow entered the hallway, moving unnaturally, like it didn't belong to this world. My breath caught. I pressed myself against the cushions, my body taut with fear. The shadows shifted around me. I could almost hear them laughing, whispering of my doom. I felt the air grow cold, heavier. Could it be? Was someone actually in my house? Goosebumps erupted on my arms. I felt trapped, alone, and utterly exposed. The house creaked again, a door slammed somewhere far off. Panic surged. I was the only one here. Wasn't I? The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of my quickening breath. I stole another glance towards the shadow, my heart racing. It shifted again, closer now, too close. I thought I could see a shape forming. A figure standing still, waiting. The world shrank to that moment, my hands shaking, my chest tight. I couldn't look away. What was it? Who were they? Then came a noise, a raspy whisper. My name. Someone was calling me. I froze, paralyzed. The figure stepped further into the dim light, the floorboards creaking underfoot. Was this the end? Just as my mind raced, the light flickered. I screamed. And then, darkness fell. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness enveloped me, thick and suffocating, swallowing the remnants of my scream. Moments passed like hours, and I nearly forgot I had a body, suspended in a void as elemental as fear itself. My pulse rushed in my ears, drowning out all other sounds, until a coarse rasp whispered once more. A taunting echo of my name reverberated through the blackness. Anna. The voice was closer now, slithering around me like smoke, wrapping itself around my throat as if to choke the last ounces of courage I might have had left. I forced my eyes open, willing myself to see, to grasp any sliver of reality amongst the shadows. The flickering light returned, a bulb fighting to stay alive, casting frantic, spastic shadows over the walls that morphed into grotesque figures, inching closer yet never quite revealing their true forms. My breath hitched as I caught sight of it again, the figure, standing just at the edge of flickering light, its edges blending seamlessly into the darkness behind. "Anna," the voice hissed again, and the thrill of recognition sent ice coursing through my veins. It sounded like me. A warped reflection of my own voice, dripping with malice. My name turned into a warning, a curse. I dared not answer. Trembling, I pressed my back into the couch, the old fabric scratching against my skin, and just like that, the shadows shifted, swallowing the light whole. I was plunged into an unimaginably deep darkness where time ceased to exist, and every breath was a desperate plea for clarity. The wind shrieked against the windows, and I felt something wet brush against my cheek. A fleeting touch, uninvited and sinister. I recoiled, pulling my knees to my chest. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it lurking, breathing, waiting in the corners of the pitch-dark room, taunting me with its presence. "Do you see it, Anna?" The voice wasn't just in my head anymore, it echoed around me. The words sank into my very being, causing fiery trails of terror to blaze along my spine that I couldn't see, could hardly think. I closed my eyes tightly and willed it away. "It's not real," I whispered to myself. "It can't be real." My thoughts spiraled, tripping over each other like prey fleeing from a predator, and then it came, a presence, heavy and suffocating, like a storm pressing down on my chest. I felt the air suddenly shift, oppressive with dread, and I knew it stood mere inches away, scrutinizing me from the depth of the shadows. The silence enveloped me once more, stretching taut, then, inexplicably, a flicker of light surged to life, illuminating for a split second the room around me. I scanned the space frantically, heart racing, eyes darting. Clarity was fleeting, but what I saw darted into my mind with vivid intensity: a featureless face, void of emotion or identity, hovering over me in the dim room, its eyes impossible to gauge. That I gasped, bolts of ice shooting down my spine. A choked sob escaped my lips as the light vanished once more, plunging me back into that overwhelming, suffocating blackness. I couldn't allow it, couldn't let the weight of despair bear down on me. I resolved to move, the fight igniting within me. But the floorboards groaned beneath me, refusing to support my escape. My feet were anchored as if the very essence of malevolence had seeped into the wood. Panic surged. I fought against it, my limbs heavy, resisting the grip of paralysis. "Anna," the voice sang eerily, now mingled with the sound of ragged breathing that echoed around, encircling me like noose. "Why do you fight? Leave me alone." I shouted, desperation lending strength to my voice, although the tremor revealed my fear. With a guttural hissing laugh, the darkness seemed to pulse with pleasure, and I could feel its satisfaction along my skin. There was a sudden shift, an overwhelming rush of cold air as the light flickered back to life, illuminating the room once more. Only this time, I was not alone. Shapes emerged through the shadows, figures clad in darkness, their eyes glinting with a predatory hunger. They moved toward me as if called by the sound of my heartbeat, inching closer, their mouths twisted into mocking grins, whispering secrets that twisted like thorns in my mind. That I could feel it building inside me, a terrible scream. But just as I drew in breath to unleash it, the front door slammed open, crashing against the wall with a tortured screech that echoed through the chaos. The figures halted, their heads twisting toward the source of the disturbance. An icy horror seeped into my heart as I saw a man standing in the doorway, outlined by the stormy sky. But the disbelief shattered my sanity. His eyes, those hollowed, ghastly eyes, drank in the scene around him, filled with an emptiness that knew no bounds. "Run, Anna," he croaked, voice cracking like brittle glass, and then the shadows surged forward, their snarls drowning out his warning, and I felt myself being pulled into their darkness once more, the world spinning as chaos ensued. That I was trapped between two horrors, the unknown of what lurked in the shadows and the haunting figure of the man in the doorway, staring through me as the light flickered one last time before everything shifted into darkness. The air was thick with anticipation, and ambience so dense it cradled the unmistakable scent of fear. I struggled against the tide of despair rushing around me, clinging to the echoes of the stranger's voice as he pleaded for me to run. But the oppressive darkness devoured his warning, leaving me paralyzed in a swirling maelstrom of panic. The shadows shifted, swirling around my form, their whispers turning into a chorus that echoed within my mind. "Join us, Anna," they hissed, their tones laced with cruel delight. They reached out with insidious tendrils, brushing against my skin, each cool caress a reminder that I was no longer alone. I had become the prey for something far more sinister than I could comprehend. Just behind me, in the suffocating veil of black, a different presence stirred. It loomed, shifting through the dark with a predatory grace that dripped malice. I could feel its eyes on me pulsing, glinting with an insatiable hunger, hungry for the warmth of human despair. I could almost sense its breath, a chilling gust that curled around my neck with the promise of horror. "Please, Anna," the voice of the stranger persisted, now more panicked, his silhouette darting back and forth as if he, too, was caught in the throes of an unseen battle. In that moment, clarity emerged. I needed to find my courage break through the paralyzing despair that gripped me like a vice. Yet, just as I steeled myself, the shadows surged forward, snatching his figure back into their depths with a furious force. "No!" I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat as hope shattered like glass. A surge of raw desperation propelled me to move. I forced my feet forward, each step unsteady as the shadows lunged toward me like ravenous wolves. I could sense their breath, hot and fetid, grazing against my skin, sending my senses into a whirl of petrified agony. "The light, Anna. The light." The words blurred through the chaos, urging me forward. I tore through the darkness, hand outstretched, fingers grazing the cool surface of the wooden table that stood before me. I clawed for the small lamp that sat at its center, my heart racing, the flickering bulb a beacon of salvation tangled in the weave of unseen horrors. Then my fingers finally wrapped around the cold metal base, and with frantic effort, I twisted it desperately. The light surged forth, cutting through the veil of malevolence. Shadows recoiled, shrieking with a guttural cry, their forms dissolving back into the margins, revealing the distorted shapes that flickered through the illumination, but the relief was fleeting. For in that harsh brightness, I glimpsed the thing that had been waiting just behind the veil of dread. It was a reflection, my own twisted visage, eyes wide with terror, mouth stretched into a grim smile far too wide, painted in an unsettling likeness to the face of the quiet man at the door. "No," I gasped, horror washing over me like ice water. The chilling realization began to settle. It wasn't just the shadows that drew near, they were manifesting in a grotesque parody of myself, feeding off my terror, embodying the very essence of my fears. The flickering light became inadequate, struggling against the overwhelming tide of darkness that in that moment, I noticed the whispers returned, sweeter, more insidious. "You cannot escape, Anna," they lulled, curling around my name like a twisted lullaby. I stumbled back, bumping against the wall, air gasping in and out of my lungs like a drowning man, but then, there was a sound, a soft, almost melodic chime, resonating from the doorway. I turned, eyes widening as the man I thought lost emerged from the shadows, although no longer with that chilling emptiness. Instead, he wore a smile that made my skin crawl, processing nothing of the fear that had riddled my spirit. "Anna," he crooned, his voice now hauntingly soft, a wicked symphony. "You belong with us now." Before I could reconcile the horror in his tone, the shadows surged once again, coiling around my ankles like living chains. I screamed, a banshee's wail that echoed and bounced off the walls. Still. That man stood there, unmoved, as if the chaos around him was merely a quaint distraction, and then the light flickered one last time. In that fleeting brightness, I realized my only escape was moving further into darkness, where the shadows writhed invitingly, beckoning with whispers of assurance, promising sweet release from fear. But could I trust them? Or was it a trap, another fragment of my unraveling mind? With desperate resolve, I turned, preparing to plunge into the unknown, but a sharp hand seized my wrist, pulling me back violently. "Let go!" I shrieked, the raging breath of monsters gathering, alive in every shadowy corner of the room. It was not until the darkness swallowed the last vestiges of light that I understood the terrible truth. Escape would demand a sacrifice, not a willingness to face the dark but of something deeper, something precious. The menacing laughter crept ever closer, then, in the suffocating void, I felt the phantom grip of those pale creatures tightening, dragging me back toward the twisted reflection of myself, the shadows whispering their last words, "Welcome home, Anna." And just as the darkness was about to envelop me completely, I glimpsed another figure, this one new, standing strong as a storm brewed forth, eyes shining with an unsettling glow, mouth curled into a sinister smile. "Your time has come," I heard it whisper, and my heart raced with horrifying recognition, a new terror forcing me to question whether I was ever truly alone. The room trembled with the weight of impending dread, the air thick with an unuttered chant that curled around me, enveloping my very soul. I had not just stumbled into a fight against the shadows, I had cornered myself within a web of deception spun by figures I could not understand. The newcomer remained a hazy silhouette, observing me as though I were a mere curiosity rather than a terrified human. There was an undeniable familiarity that seeped into my bones, a reflection of the dread I felt within myself. With a trembling hand pressed against the wall for support, I inhaled sharply, gathering shards of courage to meet the gaze of that impossible figure. "Who are you?" I managed to utter, the quiver of my voice giving away the terror that festered like an open wound. "Do you not recognize your own kin?" The voice was smooth and seductive, yet there was something distinctly cold beneath its surface. "Perhaps it's best if I show you." I recoiled instinctively as the words dripped with sinister intent, but even as I physically shrank back, I was arrested by the longing echo of familiarity that lulled me forward. A flickering moment of clarity fought against the encroaching despair. My instincts screamed for me to flee, yet there was something alluring about the being standing before me. In a blink, the figure advanced, the shadows retreating as if parting for a long-lost king. His presence exuded a palpable power, and with each step, I felt the burden of my own fear begin to dissipate. "Join us, Anna," he urged, the malice behind the sweetness growing sharper, more defined. "You need not suffer alone. We can protect you from the darkness. You have lost so much already, why not reclaim what belongs to you?" Devoid of light, doubts tugged at my willpower as I teetered at the precipice of acceptance. Memories surged through my mind like torrential waves, a kaleidoscope of agony, the fleeting faces of those I loved, now mere whispers amidst the chaos. I clutched my head in anguish, the figures around me merging into my deepest fears, and yet this creature, this grotesque reflection of an envoy from hell, promised something deeper, a connection I desperately craved, even if it came with a web of shadows. "Say the words, Anna," he whispered, drawing closer so that I could feel the chill radiating off him like a dead star. "Embrace your place among us." I staggered back, my mind racing as the memories of warmth and laughter washed away like sandcastles before a tidal wave. Behind him, the shadows churned menacingly, undulating like serpents ready to strike. The whispering chorus grew louder, a cacophony of promises and threats mixed into one, wrapping around me like chains. And then it happened, a forgotten name slid into my thoughts, a child's laughter recalled vividly, Isabella. My breath hitched as I realized the cost of this dreadful choice, the value of the threads I felt slipping through my fingers. The shadows quaked, responding to the invocation of my lost sister. With sudden insistence, the darkness responded where once they reached out with alluring whispers, now they recoiled with vengeful screams, revealing grotesque forms that distorted the very fabric of reality. The figure fumed, eyes narrowing. "You would reclaim the thin, wistful memories of the past. You would choose that over power, over salvation. Why don't you show me what happened to her?" My voice trembled with urgency, a sliver of defiance mixing with fear. "If you're all-powerful, let me see her." With a mournful wail, the figure summoned an unholy light, ripping through the darkness. Before my eyes danced fleeting specters, scenes I had long buried within the depths of my pain. I gasped as shadows morphed into vivid images, Isabella and I laughing in the sunlight, our parents smiling, everything a blend of joy so profound it hurt. Yet then darkness enveloped my sister, an insatiable force pulling her toward an abyss I could barely reason. Suddenly, that very abyss flickered into existence around me, swallowing the joyful memories, leaving only a gaping maw whispering my sister's name, echoing with mocking laughter. "Isabella!" I screamed, the ground shaking beneath my feet, shadows coiling tighter than ever. The figure leaned closer still, those hollow but vibrant eyes piercing into my very soul. Choose, Anna. Your sister, or the shadows. What do you desire more? Every fiber of my being screamed for me to save Isabella, to tear through the veil of shadows that threatened to chain me to despair. But as the echoes of her laughter faded, I felt the urge to yield to the ominous presence coil around me, whispering promises laced with honeyed pain. And then, as the fabric of reality began to fray, a low growl resonated from the depths of the shadows, and fear ripped through me as the unsettling figure promised, "Your answer lies within. But know this, the price of your choice will haunt you eternally." A horrific cacophony erupted around us, shadows twisting and writhing like dancers in a macabre ballet. I closed my eyes, heart racing as a primal instinct gripped my throat, reflecting the fear within me. Just as I reached the precipice of surrender, a figure lunged from the depth of darkness, nothing human, all teeth and fury, an embodiment of every nightmare I had ever known. And it lunged straight for me, forcing the choice into a moment of consuming dread. "Anna, let go." The voice of my sister echoed once more, solidifying the horrors I had yet to face. But my answer hovered just beyond my reach, and as the shadowy figure was but a breath away, I felt the ground shift beneath me, a chasm of fear opening wide. I was falling into darkness, into oblivion. The final word, a gasp caught in my throat, faded into the void, swallowed whole by an eternity of shadows, and as the abyss closed in, I saw nothing but distant screams reaching for salvation, a desperate plea that promised to reshape my nightmare forever. The darkness enveloped me like a shroud as I fell through the abyss, my mind momentarily flashing to the memories I had conjured. Space twisted and turned, fracturing reality into sharp shards that glimmered with remnants of my past. Suddenly, I landed with a bone-jarring impact in a cold, damp space. The air was suffused with a putrid stench, the kind that clawed at the back of my throat and filled my lungs with unending despair. I slowly pushed myself to my feet, squinting against the bite of dampness that clung to my skin. In front of me, a flickering candle cast sickly shadows against the walls, giving life to grotesque forms that danced and shifted, as though mocking my fright. Isabella the first whispered, feeling absurdly small amidst the overwhelming dread. The flickering light dimmed, then blazed again, illuminating the outline of a figure at the far end of the room. It stood motionless, obscured and draped in darkness, as though it were woven from the very fabric of nightmares. As my gaze locked onto it, a low chuckle vibrated through the air, a sound steeped in malice and mockery. "Welcome back, Anna," it hissed, and even from a distance, I felt its gaze pinning me down, an anchor of terror. "Did you think you could escape the consequences of your choices? That you could forget what happened?" I stumbled back, dread coiling tightly around my heart. There was something unearthly about its presence, something I recognized but refused to name. "What have you done to her?" The words fell from my lips as raw desperation clawed through me, past the veil of fear, a plea for retribution, a promise I intended to fulfill. "Oh dear child," it crooned, its voice dripping with dark amusement. "Your precious Isabella is merely a pawn in a far greater game. You see, things can never be what they were." The creature stepped closer, its features sharpening into something almost human but twisted and repulsive, bearing the haunting semblance of a once-loved face. "But do not despair. I can offer you something far more valuable than your sister's misplaced innocence. Power is within your grasp, but it comes at a price. What do you want?" I spat, feeling the brave facade I had built crack under pressure, but there was no turning back. I was drawn to this creature like a moth to flames, even when it promised only destruction. "What is it you desire, Anna?" It reached out a hand, elongated fingers dripping shadows that curled toward the floor. "Your sister or your power?" The flickering candlelight caught pools of darkness slithering at its feet, creeping toward me, beckoning with sinister allure. I felt the chill race up my spine as I recalled Isabella, the last glimmers of our childhood together, a golden thread in the tapestry of my fading heart. Yet, the pulse of vengeance surged. "Perhaps I should show you," it said, and suddenly, the room morphed again, folding in on itself. Walls of stone erupted into vibrant colors, swirling like a tornado around me. With a flash, I found myself standing within the throes of memory Isabella, laughing, her face bright and pure. But as I reached for her, the scene warped, distorting into visions of her trapped in endless darkness, clawing desperately at the edges of despair that I screamed as each of her pleas crashed into me, urging me to act, demanding I save her from the very depths of the hell she thrived in. Even as the creature stood beside me, grinning, extending its hand like a warped mirror reflecting the fear trapped within my soul. "This is your gift, Anna," it declared. "To wield the strength of shadows, to reclaim your destiny. Free her. Make the choice." And then shadows tightened around me, the memory of my sister fading, dissolving with each passing second, while the vile laughter of that dark figure sank into my bones. I felt the walls of reality pulse with every heartbeat, shadows threatening to envelop me as I endured the clashing visions, a chilling juxtaposition of my desire and fear. The choice glimmered like a knife, its edge sharp and deadly. Before I even realized what I was doing, I found myself reaching toward the figure, entranced by its swirling energy, but just then a chilling wail erupted around me, piercing through the illusions. "Anna! Dante!" With that single desperate cry, the air around me crackled with energy, and the walls began to shake, the grotesque reality dissolving in on itself as everything started to split apart. Panic surged within me, drowning out reason, as I realized my metamorphosis was imminent. The painful tension hung heavy in the air, and the malevolent figure grinned wider, eyes glowing like molten metal. Suddenly, the darkness exploded, and I was thrust backwards into a blinding light that would either consume me or set me free. I reached for the spectral hand of Isabella, but the space between us was too great, and as I was pulled back from the void, the last sound I heard was a chilling promise echoing in the distance. "Forever is just the beginning, dear Anna." Then, the light swallowed me whole. When the light receded, consciousness returned slowly, dragging me from the depths of an abyss more suffocating than I could fathom. I was back, but not in the familiar confines of my home. The room loomed large and alien, an endless corridor of cracked mirrors warped by time, the reflections slimed with what looked like agony. Every inch of the place spoke of neglect, despair, and unending sorrow. Instinctively, I touched my face, feeling the cold sweat clinging to my brow. I could still hear the echoes of that laugh, dark and mocking, resounding off the walls, taunting me from the corners of my mind. Around me, the air thickened, charged with a malevolence that sent my heart racing. I was surrounded, the corridor stretched infinitely, shadows creeping closer to my heels as I hurried forward, my breaths panicky, desperate. I could not let the creature catch me again, not with Isabella's wail still ringing in my ears. I needed to find her, to rescue her from whatever twisted nightmare she was trapped within. And yet, something sinister lay beneath the surface, a current of breath, a flicker at the edge of my vision. I turned, caught a glimpse of darting shadows slipping away, then vanished into the dark. Was it the creature? Or another of its machinations, waiting for the opportune moment to pounce? I shivered at the thought. "Isabella!" I called out into the void, my voice a fragile thread interwoven with dread. The silence echoed back, devoid of life, but the air felt heavy, too heavy, as if my words had awakened something waiting just beyond sight. Pressing forward, I found a door lodged between two mirrors, each one reflecting distorted versions of myself. I stepped closer, desperate to escape the corridor and whatever monstrosity lay within. As my hand touched the doorknob, a jolt of energy surged through me, a knot of warning tightening in my gut. The knob turned with a lazy creak, the door opening into a room clotted with darkness, foul scents swirling around me. As I stepped in, the door slammed shut behind me with a resounding thud that sent my pulse racing. A shudder reverberated through the walls, followed by soft whispers that crawled under my skin. "Anna, come play." The voice was lilting, sweet yet altogether wrong. It sent cascades of dread rolling through my body, and every instinct screamed for me to flee, but my feet were rooted to the spot. Before me stood an impossibly tall figure veiled in tattered shadows, its face hidden beneath matted tendrils of darkness that seemed to writhe like serpents. The silhouette beckoned me, movement supple and fluid as it swayed in a macabre dance. The whispers hissed and coiled around me like smoke, warm and suffocating. "Where is Isabella?" My voice cracked, barely a whisper beneath the commanding pulse of fear. The figure laughed, a melodic sound that resonated with the broken shards of my mind. "You speak her name like a prayer, yet you fail to understand, dear Anna. Power is a fickle mistress, love, a burden." Tendrils of darkness lashed out around me, reaching for my throat like constricting vines, choking away my words. "Stop!" I gasped, struggling against the grip as tendrils coiled deeper. "I'll do anything. Just tell me where she is." "Oh, you think you can bargain?" "How naive," it hissed, laughter echoing through the cramped space. Every sound bounced and twisted, creating a symphony of chaos. "Your sister dances at the gates of madness, her soul a sweet whisper in the night. But to find her, you must take her place." With a sudden lurch, a vision bloomed before me, Isabella, lost in a swirling tempest of shadows, her face twisted in agony as she clawed at the walls of her prison. I yelled her name, but the room swallowed my voice, replacing it with a cacophony of torment that echoed through the darkness, resonating deep within me. "Choose, Anna." The figure loomed closer, its face obscured by shadows, claws at the ready. "Will you step into the dark? Or continue to suffer as you watch your sister slip further away?" Before I could answer, the floor erupted, cracks spiderwebbing outward as the obsidian pushed against the surface, threatening to swallow me whole. My heart raced, matching the frantic urgency of what I saw. "Isabella!" I screamed again, the name escaping as a raw plea, a final tether binding me to hope. The walls of the room shifted, the darkness shrieked like a living entity in chaos, pulling me down. The figure's laughter rippled through the air, wrapping around my mind like a cruel embrace. "Forever is just the beginning." It cackled, as with one last tug, I began to succumb to the shapeless void beneath me. In that moment, white-hot terror burned through my veins, and life hung by the thinnest thread. The darkness was not an end but a portal. Isabella's screams echoed louder, and I felt the pulse of desperation blaring through my bones like a siren. Suddenly, the twisted figure lunged, its claws outstretched, and as darkness engulfed me, a single thought thrummed above all: the price of power may cost more than I could ever pay. With a deafening crash, everything fell silent, and the door slammed shut once more. And then, in the profound darkness, I could hear a whisper that froze my very soul, a voice that was all too familiar. "Anna, where are you?" The voice pierced through the shroud of darkness, sending icy fingers crawling up my spine. The tone, a mixture of innocence and something far more insidious, was unmistakably Isabella's, but twisted in a way that felt wrong. "Anna, where are you?" It echoed in my mind, not as a question but a haunting melody that drew me deeper into despair. Desperation clawed at my throat as I wrestled with the soft whisper of darkness wrapping around me. "Isabella!" I shouted, reversing my earlier plea, but all that met my ears was the deadened silence of the room. Shadows gathered tighter around me, a jarring contrast to the faint sound of her voice that lingered in the air. I stumbled back, my foot catching on something soft yet insidious. Looking down, I recoiled at what I saw: a mass of shadow-drenched limbs intertwining with roots that throbbed like a heartbeat, all crawling toward me in a grotesque dance. They yearned for contact, hungry and desperate. Another voice erupted, deeper, snarling, laced with sinister amusement. "Isabella's lie has begun to weave through the veins of your mind, hasn't it, Anna?" The figure materialized from the depths of the void, its face still hidden, yet I felt its gaze piercing through the darkness, an unseen weight that pressed against my heart. The far-reaching whispers morphed into a sickening cacophony of pleas and laughter, swirling around and inside me, drowning out my rational thoughts. "Come play," they teased, swirling like tornadoes through the room. "Join us in our eternity of suffering." Fighting against the tendrils creeping along my skin, I screamed, "What do you want from me?" The air weighed down, each breath labored with panic as I churned through the depths of my fear. The figure stepped closer, its true form still masked in shadows, but the edges began to blur. I could see the glimmers of what looked like broken mirrors scattered across its surface, each shard reflecting different versions of myself, twisted and torn in agony. Your sister seeks freedom from a fate worse than death. And to find her, you must confront your greatest fear. You must become the hollow shell that we desire, it hissed, an electric thrill coursing through the air. Just tell me where she is. I begged, my voice cracking under the weight of my desperation. To know, to truly know, you must play the game. A malicious smile abruptly broke through its shadowy facade, extending into something far more unsettling. And fear not, she is closer than you think. Suddenly, the floor trembled beneath my feet, vibrating with a rhythmic pulse that seemed to echo my racing heart. The door rattled violently, as if something desperately wished to break free. A howl exploded from it, horrifying in its intensity, and the walls of the room quaked. I felt the familiar sensation of being drawn into an impossible void, yet I resisted, blood pounding in my ears. The whispers escalated, clawing at my sanity, morphing into wails of anguish. Isabella. Please, I can save you. The words escaped as a broken sob, chaos consuming me. Your salvation lies in surrendering to the dark. An exchange must be made. The figure danced closer, shadows swirling, faces of past victims flickering visibly beneath the darkness. You might just find that what you curse turns into desire. After all, once the door opens, you may never want it to close. Tendrils lashed at me, the air growing frigid as a powerful shadow began to rise from the ground, enveloping everything in darkness. I stumbled backward, heart racing, desperately searching for an escape, and then, through the swirling chaos, a glimmer of light, a feeble, unwavering shimmer that pulled at my very core. Anna! Help me! Isabella's voice echoed through the noise, slicing through my thoughts. Instant and electric clarity emerged. I was not here to bargain, I was here to take back my sister. Spurred by the instinct of love and desperation, I lunged for the door, reaching for that horrible reality I couldn't let consume us both, but just as my fingers grasped the doorknob, the shadows released a blood-curdling scream, a pause in the chaos as the air shifted. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me as the door began to swing open, revealing not a way out, but another disturbing reflection, a twisted version of my home, shrouded in darkness. Come play, Anna. Isabella's voice rose into the chaos, but something was wrong. Her tone shifted, oozing with a seductive promise that chilled me to the bone. As reality unraveled around me, terror seized me. Would I find Isabella waiting or something more sinister behind the threshold? Just as I took a step toward the open door, the room erupted into shadows, dragging me down to the floor, a torrent of despair rushing towards me. I gasped, feeling the weight of eternity pressing down, the whispers turning frenzied, layer upon layer of pleading, laughter, and screams. And before I could shut the door or embrace the fateful abyss, I heard her haunting words one last time echoing through the shadows, "Let the game begin, Anna." And suddenly, all went dark. Consciousness flickered back like a dying flame, a disorienting resurgence, more dreamlike than real, teetering on the brink of another nightmare. I gasped for air, chilled to the bone, unsure if I still occupied my former reality. My surroundings, heavy drapes of darkness cloaked everything, an oppressive weight pressing down from above as if the very air conspired against me. A mere whisper away, the shadows danced with familiar malice, exhibiting a life independent of their master. Tendrils crept toward me, like greedy fingers exploring every ounce of fear that pulsed in the depths of my soul. I could feel their hunger wrapping around my throat, constricting tighter with each flutter of my heart. Instinct propelled me to rise, but I fell back. The floor beneath me pulsed with dread, an echo of my own terror reverberating through the chilling void. From the depths, shapes began to emerge, grotesque figures sculpted from the nightmares that haunted unsleeping nights. Their limbs twisted at impossible angles, their mouths stretched into wide, gaping maws that broke into violent laughter, exposing rows of jagged teeth. Welcome back. A sing-song voice called mockingly from the tangle of shadows. It thrummed in my blood, chilling my very essence. I desperately scanned the room, the familiar corners of my home twisted into a dissection of horrors I could never have imagined. Anna, you've come to play. The squeal echoed, shifting into droning laughter that tore through the fabric of my sanity like a knife. I clutched my head, trying to drown them out, to quench the raw terror coursing through my veins. Isabella! I cried out again, fighting through the mirage of grotesque figures that circled around me. I'm here. I'm coming for you. My voice cracked, desperation spilling out with each plea I hurled into the shadows, yet the darkness snickered, conflating my hope into a cacophony of despair. Before me, a grotesque shape shifted, the embodiment of what had been my sister's laughter, now wretched and corrupted. Come find me, it beckoned, a grating whisper that coiled around my heart, making it squeeze painfully. No longer could I distinguish whether it was truly her or just another masked deception from whatever hideous force had taken root in my life. The thought paralyzed me, but I shuddered and refused to succumb to the malevolence surrounding me. In a flash, a fragmented memory struck me. The image of our childhood playroom flooded my thoughts, a sanctuary I had all but forgotten with its joyful colors and sunshine filtering through the windows. A blissful haven that now felt like a taunting contrast to the nightmarish landscape consuming me. Make a choice, Anna, the shadows murmured, their voices a thunderous symphony echoing in my ears. What will you trade for your sister? A sudden chill gripped my spine, an unsettling realization slithered into my mind. The darkness was waiting for my answer, intrigued, almost giddy with my hesitation. I felt the weight of their anti-ion in every fiber of my being. Will it be the love that binds you, or the fear that liberates you? The laughter crescendoed into a fever dream, swirling around, enveloping me in an alien warmth that burned my skin. They hungered for a sacrifice, waiting, curling around me like a coiling serpent ready to strike. What do you want? My voice trembled, oscillating between rage and terror, and I demanded the truth, an anchor amidst the chaos. The velvety darkness squeezed tighter around me, and suddenly, grotesque faces emerged in tantalizing flashes, eyes bulging with an insatiable hunger for pain, for great sacrifice. Freedom from fear requires a price, my dear, one boomed, its mouth opening wide like a vault, filled with glistening fangs and gluttonous intentions. To save her, you must let go of the light in your heart. The suggestion lingered like honey on my tongue, sweet, yet fated to bind me in darkness forever. A strange longing bubbled within, coaxing me toward an unthinkable resolve. As the shadows tightened their grip, I felt tears track down my cheeks, each one simmering with fear and forged desperation. I will save her. I screamed, the weight of my words suspended in the air. Inverting my vision, I searched the tender folds of darkness that now seemed almost serene, beckoning me to embrace the horrors that lay within its depths. But just as I steeled myself, a sudden scream pierced the fabric of my thoughts. Isabella. It rang like a fragile bell tinged with pure terror, each note echoing through the void. The shadows around me grew frenetic, and visible panic rippled through their twisted forms. Time runs thin. They hissed sharply. What will it be, Anna? With an impossible weight on my chest, an unending pull toward whatever lay waiting in the abyss, I felt a horrifying clarity. I stood not just to save my sister. I was part of something much larger, threading alongside forces that demanded a choice so twisted it could unravel my very identity. As I prepared to speak, something in the darkness erupted. A shape peeked through, familiar yet entirely wrong, and I froze, heart hammering in my chest. An unfathomable dread wrapped around me like a vice. In my mind I saw not only my sister but also another horrifying apparition, a doppelganger of myself, smiling with an unsettling clarity. Realization gripped me before I could catch my breath. Whoever emerged next would determine everything: my fate, my sister's, and perhaps, even the world beyond this pervasive darkness. With trembling lips, I finally spoke: I choose. And the darkness erupted into frenzied chaos as everything shattered around me. The roar of shadows enveloped me, a cacophony of malevolent voices shrieking my name, each syllable curdling the air. In that moment of revelation, when I dared to utter my choice, I felt the very essence of the darkness shift, react. My words were a catalyst, and the abyss relished the opportunity. Anna! Anna! The cries wailed, morphing into stretching echoes that clawed at my resolve. In this tumult of sound and fury, I could feel the very walls of reality around me crack, splintering under the weight of a secret that was no longer mine to keep. Just as the shadows surged forward, an unexpected warmth brushed against my skin, drawing me back to a distant memory of sunlight bathing the garden in golden light. I could almost hear laughter, a sound so pure that it felt foreign in the grip of the encroaching darkness. It steadied my racing heart for a fleeting moment, providing a glimmer of hope amid the storm. Suddenly, amidst the roaring chaos, something shifted. The literal ground beneath me began to ripple, undulating like a tide, and my surroundings morphed. The grotesque silhouettes melted away, replaced by a spectral light that poured through the dank air. I stumbled forward, compelled by a force that felt both inviting and sinister. "Isabella, is that you?" I called out, heart thrumming in my chest as the luminous light morphed into a warm corridor. Ethereal doorways lined the walls, adorned with familiar childhood paintings and memories I longed to reclaim. I ran my fingers along the frames, urging the longing to break free. Each picture pulsed with vibrant life, offering promises of solace and warmth that drew me deeper into this sanctuary, yet, paranoia nipped at my heels. This was no ordinary dream, something horrific lurked behind the enchantment. With each step, an unseen presence loomed over me, growing heavier as shadows clung stubbornly to the walls. A pulse beneath my feet sent ripples of agitation rushing through the ground as if it yearned to devour me whole. That I rushed through hallways adorned with memories, frantically seeking my sister, driven by an urgency I could hardly rationalize. The laughter from earlier twisted in the air, morphing back into the sing-song voice that sent shivers down my spine. "You made your choice, Anna. Come and play." "No. I didn't mean to," I shouted into the light, striking back against the insatiable grip of the darkness encroaching with each step. The regret weighed me down, but desperation demanded I go on. Suddenly, I came upon a door, a simple wooden frame, marred by scratches unfamiliar to me. This had to lead to her. Lifting my hand to grasp the handle, an overwhelming dread washed over me, a tangible suffocation filling my lungs as I gripped it tightly. "Isabella, I'm coming." As I turned the knob, the air crackled with energy, and the door swung open, revealing a small room that felt impossibly expansive. It held remnants from my childhood, broken toys, faded photographs, and whispers of laughter dancing just beyond the threshold. In the center lay a small child's bed, pristine and untouched, bathed in that same haunting light. "Isabella?" I cried out, stepping in. "Are you here?" But there was no answer, only the flicker of something beneath the bed. My heart hammered louder, sending bursts of apprehension through my veins. I crouched down, straining to peer into the shadows, where a pair of eyes glimmered back at me, bright, innocent, and utterly vacant. "Help me," the voice echoed, trembling and fragile like a paper thread ready to snap. Instantly, something shifted within me, a deep yearning to free this child from whatever horror lingered outside. Just as I reached forward, something gripped my ankle, a cold weeping fog that curled around to bind me. I looked down and recognized flesh-rotting hands grasping at me, faces emerging from the damp snugness of the dark, their eyes filled with primal hunger. "No! Stop!" I screamed, kicking free, scrambling backward until my back hit the cold wall, sending painful shivers along my spine. The room began to warp, the door I had entered silently dissolved into nothingness, unveiling an impossible abyss that threatened to swallow me whole. "Make a choice." The voices surged, swirling with a bitter intensity that seized my breath. The anticipation felt no longer playful, but dread-filled and contemptuous. The hands clawing at my feet pulled tighter, dragging me closer to a fate I could barely comprehend. In horror, I glanced back at the child who lingered in that fleeting moment of innocence, her eyes filled with a knowledge beyond her years, a warning, perhaps. And in a breathless panic, I realized the identity of the child stretched beyond mere resemblance. The shadowy silhouettes, the corrupted laughter, they all converged, and there came a low menacing whisper in the air surrounding us all. "Shall you sacrifice this child? Or will you give yourself?" As I gasped in shock, the world shattered around me into fragments, the cycle that had ensnared me in its web speeding toward a final reckoning, unraveling into chaos, strata of reality colliding in violent colors, gripping me tighter as if the very fabric of existence was in the hands of something far more sinister. Then, from the depths of the darkness, a single chilling voice roared with authority. Your choice, Anna, will echo beyond what you can imagine. With the ground vibrating beneath me, I opened my mouth to speak, my choice suspended on the precipice of salvation and doom. But before any sound could emerge, darkness erupted from every corner with a wrathful crescendo, swallowing everything whole, leaving only a chilling echo of the question that would haunt me forever. What am I willing to lose? I don't know how long I drifted in that void, but when the icy grip of nothingness finally released me, I found myself once again in a world painted with shadows and dread. The flickering light of reality had returned to me, but it only illuminated the hallway of horrors I had known all too well, the dark corridor of mirrors, reflecting twisted realities that echoed my deepest fears. The memory of that child, calling for help, clawed at my heart. I could still feel the sticky heat of despair enveloping my limbs as visions of the shadowy figures surged around me, gloating with a satisfied hunger, their malevolence a palpable entity that clung to the air that I was being pulled forward, almost against my will, deeper into the labyrinthine maw of the house that wasn't really a house at all. It was more a living, breathing organism. Its walls seemed to pulse with malicious joy, gorging on fear and desperation like a ravenous beast. But something dawned on me as I traversed the endless corridor. Amidst the cacophony, one vision pierced through louder than the rest, the shimmering image of Isabella, calling out to me, her laughter tainted by the horror of her plight, compelling me closer, deeper into the shadows. Isabella! I whispered, my voice a fragile echo against the chaotic clamor, but the darkness hungrily absorbed my cries, drenching them in bitter mockery. It came rushing back to me, all the decisions, all the moments of despair that twisted and knotted in my belly. I have to save her, I declared in fervor, driven by an instinct that beckoned me forward. Then, as I continued along the dismal path, I began to notice the walls diverging, leading me to a pair of doors that loomed like hungry mouths, each promising salvation at a tremendous cost. The first door, black as night with an unnatural sheen, emanated a low hum, vibrating with a sinister energy that made my skin prickle. The second, ungainly and warped, appeared almost to apologize for its presence. A soft glow radiated from the cracks, hinting at warmth, at home, at safety. Open either one, a voice echoed around me, the sound merging like the hum of bees. Choose wisely, dear Anna. My insides twisted, lurching in protest. A tempest brewed in my mind as the shadows surged, swirling around my feet like restless souls desperate for a final resolution, urging me toward the dark door that teased with promises of power and escape from my painful burden. But Isabella's ethereal laugh broke through that encroaching darkness, her whisper becoming a beacon of light amidst swirling despair. It ricocheted through my thoughts, echoing with pure, innocent longing. Anna, her voice floated, haunting and sweet. Help me. I could see her face reflected in the cold surface of the glowing door, an ethereal image shimmering just beyond reach. Leaning toward it, every fiber of my being recognized the warmth that beckoned from the other side, inviting me to reclaim my sister. Deliberating, I felt the specters of the hallway inch closer, jealousy clouding the air around me as they cawed and shrieked their desperate taunts, urging me not to look too deeply into the light. In this moment of uncertainty, shadows coiled closer, anticipation thick like soup, weighing heavy against my core. Foolish girl, the voice cooed from the lurking darkness. You know, you have the power to change everything. To become more than just a mortal, trapped by love. The pressure bathed over me like thick smoke, and I could feel the unseen faces inch nearer, twisted smiles spooling into the shadow's depths. Or you can turn your back on what you truly want. The ominous voice festered through the air, resonating in tandem with whispers that began to swirl dangerously. Threads of darkness hungered to anchor me back into despair, but I gritted my teeth and inhaled deeply, pulling every memory of my sister into my focus. Flickering images of laughter, light, love, they danced like fleeting phantoms behind my eyelids, vibrant and powerful, igniting a fire deep within me. I choose. I roared, steadying myself against the crawling shadows that threatened to consume me whole. I choose salvation, no matter the cost. With a resolute grip, I grabbed the glowing doorknob and swung it open. And for a moment, an endless expanse revealed itself, flooded with blinding white light that surged forth to wash over me like a warm tide, dispelling the suffocating darkness that clawed at my heels. In that luminescence, I could see her Isabella, bathed in light, reaching for me. Hope blossomed furious within my chest as I stepped through, but reality twisted in that moment as I crossed the threshold. Suddenly, the light dimmed, the warmth chilled to a sharp bite. I felt a shudder roar through the very fabric of existence, fireworks of pain exploding in my chest. The glimmer of my sister faded, a mirage dissolving into ash before my eyes. I stumbled back, horrified, collapsing into the shadowed void. No! I screamed, felt the cold fingers of despair skittering against my skin. The shadows swarmed the room, dragging me down into relentless depths. You tricked me! The grotesque form emerged from the shadows once more, its face twisted like the spawn of nightmares, shedding the barrier between me and what I had believed was the path to redemption. Ah, dear Anna, it chuckled, a sound drenched in malice. You now see the truth, the light cannot save her. All at once, I was confronted with my darkest fears, turned back upon me like a serpent biting its tail. The faces of the figures of my shadowed memories closed in, their eyes filled with gleeful malice. I cowered, realizing I was far from salvation. I had only invoked a new resolution of pain, a spiral that would never end. However, the figure purred, in this world, darkness is a currency, your power awaits if only you embrace it. As I was pulled closer to the depths of infinity, slick with blood and shadows, the horrifying truth cascaded upon me like a torrential downpour. The darkness still lingered, throbbing with anticipation, yearning for my surrender. I was exactly where it wanted me, caught in a web of my own relentless choices and the unending cycle of grief, but the moment came, a chance to reclaim everything. You may take Isabella from me, but I will not allow the darkness to conquer me. With strength born of desperation, I clawed my way back toward the flickering light, a resolute last stand as the echoes of despair taunted me. As shadows lashed forward, desperate to drag me back, I summoned the memories that pulsed fiercely within my heart. I was Anna, Isabella's sister, and I would not yield to the darkness. I would turn it into something powerful to combat the anguish that swallowed my existence. By the love that binds, I shall rise from this darkness. I screamed, forcing my will to shatter through the shadows that sought to claim me. In that pivotal moment, a tremor rippled through the ground as the echoes of my sister's laughter rang out, harmonizing with my defiance. Come forth, power of the light. I am ready to wield you. The shadows quaked, screams clawing their way to the surface as a scalding wave of brightness burst from my palms, ripping through the fabric of reality. With one final declaration, I propelled myself forward into the embers of that brilliant light, shattering the chains that held me, pulling that radiant energy around me like armor forged from love. But in that moment, amidst rising brilliance, the shadows whispered one last haunting promise. You think you've conquered fear, Anna, they hissed, a final taunt aching in my ears. But your battle has only just begun. Unyielding darkness always lingers, and as the light disintegrated the shadows, revealing a world unknown, I understood the truth. My fight had only ever been the prologue to a greater horror that awaited. Just as that realization settled coldly in my bones, a piece of the darkness slashed across my heart, branding me as one of its own. It was the beginning of a darkness yet to come, lurking in the edges of a new dawn, and with that final shred of hesitation, I turned to the echoing dread, voicing a promise drenched with the cries of countless voices: I will never stop fighting. And the whispers of desperation echoed back, an eternal promise in the macabre theater of the cosmos: neither will we.